They say in the underworld, there are rules older than nations, codes written not in ink but in blood. And once you sign your name in that crimson ledger, you belong to it forever. This is a story about a man who tried to walk away, a man who thought he could outrun the past. But the past doesn't forget, and it never forgives. His name was John Wick, the Baba Yaga, the boogeyman, the man you sent to kill the boogeyman. But those names belong to someone else now, someone buried alongside Helen, alongside the impossible dream of a normal life. Now he was just John. He lived in a cabin 2 hours north of New York, deep in the woods where the world couldn't reach, where the only sounds were wind through pine trees and rain on the roof. He'd built parts of it himself. The deck, the stone fireplace, the fence around the small garden where he grew vegetables he barely ate. A dog slept by the hearth, not a beagle this time. A German shepherd he'd found half-starved on a back road 3 years ago. He'd named him Ash, because from ash, sometimes things grew again. John was 54 now. The years had carved deeper lines into his face. Gray touched his beard. His hands still worked fine. Steady, practiced, lethal when they needed to be. But they ached in the mornings, old injuries remembering themselves. He chopped wood, read books, watched the seasons change, and every single day he visited the small stone marker at the edge of his property where he'd scattered Helen's ashes. Morning, he'd say. Every morning, like she could hear him. Maybe she could. 3 years of peace, 3 years of silence, 3 years of pretending the world beneath the world had forgotten about him. But on this particular October evening, when the autumn air turned sharp and the sun bled red through the trees, that illusion shattered. The car came up the dirt road just after sunset. John heard it before he saw it. The crunch of gravel, the practiced cadence of someone who knew exactly where they were going. Ash growled low in his throat. "Easy," John said softly. He watched through the window as a black Mercedes stopped 30 feet from the cabin. The engine cut, the door opened, and Winston stepped out. The manager of the New York Continental, tall, elegant, three-piece suit immaculate despite the rural setting. He carried a slim black case and an expression that said this wasn't a social call. John opened the door before Winston could knock. "Jonathan," Winston said, "a statement, an acknowledgement." "Winston," John's voice was rust and smoke. "Long way from the city." "Indeed." Winston glanced past him into the warm glow of the cabin. "May I?" John stepped aside. They sat by the fireplace. Winston declined whiskey but accepted coffee. He set the case on the table between them, unopened. "You look well," Winston said. "Retirement suits you." "It's not retirement. It's just living." "Ah, semantics." Winston's smile was thin. "But I'm afraid I'm here to disturb your living, John. I wouldn't have come unless it was necessary." John's jaw tightened. "I'm out. I know. And under normal circumstances, I would never dream of asking. But these aren't normal circumstances." Winston opened the case. Inside was a single object. A coin. Gold. Heavy. The crest of the Continental etched into its face. But there was something else. A drop of dried blood on its edge. John stared at it. His chest tightened. "This was delivered to the Continental 3 days ago," Winston said quietly. "Along with a message. 2 words. He remembers." "Who sent it?" "A ghost. Dmitry Volkov." The name hit John like a bullet he'd forgotten was still lodged inside him. Dmitry. Moscow. 23 years ago. John closed his eyes. He could still see it. The warehouse. The ambush. The bullet meant for John that Dmitry had taken instead, collapsing into his arms while blood pooled on concrete. "You're going to owe me for this, John," Dmitry had gasped, grinning even as he died. Except he didn't die. Somehow, impossibly, he survived, and John had sworn an oath. A blood oath. The old kind. The binding kind. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, I'm yours. Dmitri had never called it in. Not in 23 years. Until now. Dmitri's dead, Winston continued, murdered in Moscow 3 weeks ago, but before he died, he sent this coin to the Continental with instructions. If anything happened to him, we were to find you and give you this. Winston reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. A young woman, late 20s, dark hair, eyes that carried the same fierce intelligence John remembered in Dmitri. His daughter, Winston said. Katya Volkov. She's in Prague. And the High Table has issued a sanction, open contract, $7 million. John's blood went cold. Why? Because Dmitri discovered something before he died. Something the Table wants buried, and Katya has it. John stared at the photograph. Dmitri's daughter. He'd never met her. Dmitri had kept his family separate from the life. Safe. Hidden. But not safe enough. I'm out, John said again, but his voice was hollow. Winston stood, buttoned his jacket. I know, and I told them that. But the oath, Jonathan, the blood oath, it doesn't expire, it doesn't fade. He placed a burner phone on the table. She's waiting. The address is programmed. 72 hours, then she runs. After that, he shrugged. The Table will find her. They always do. Winston walked to the door, paused. For what it's worth, I hope you choose peace, John. You've earned it, but we both know. He glanced back, eyes ancient and knowing. Men like us don't get to choose, we just get to decide how we fall. The door closed. John sat alone in the firelight, staring at the coin in his palm. Dmitri's voice echoed in his memory. You're going to owe me for this. Ash whined softly, sensing the change. John looked at the dog, at the cabin, at the life he'd built from splinters and silence. Then he stood and walked to the bedroom. In the world beneath the world, an oath is a living thing. It breathes, it waits. And when you break it, it devours you whole. The storage unit was in Newark. John hadn't been there in 3 years, and he unlocked it at dawn. The door rolled up with a metallic shriek. Inside, shadows and memory. His suits hung in garment bags, black, tailored, armor disguised as elegance. Beneath them, cases. He opened the first one with the reverence of a priest approaching an altar. Glock 26, Glock 34, AR-15, Benelli M4. Each weapon cleaned, oiled, waiting. He'd promised himself he'd never touch them again. But promises like peace were fragile things. He dressed in the dark, loaded magazines with the muscle memory of 1,000 firefights, slid knives into hidden sheaths. The suit fit perfectly. It always did. When he looked in the mirror, he saw the truth. John Wick was never gone, just sleeping. Prague was cold and gray when he arrived. The address Winston gave him led to an old factory on the Vltava River. Abandoned, rusted iron and shattered windows. The kind of place where people went to disappear. John approached on foot, moving through the shadows with practiced silence. He counted exits, sight lines, weaknesses, old instincts clawing back to life. She was inside. Katya Volkov sat on a crate near a broken window, a Makarov pistol resting on her knee. She looked up when John entered, eyes sharp and cautious. You're late, she said. No fear, just fact. Traffic. John stepped into the light. She studied him. Recognition flickered. You're him, the Baba Yaga. My father told me stories. I'm just John. No, she stood. You're the man my father trusted more than anyone. The man he saved. The man who swore an oath. John said nothing. Katya reached into her coat and pulled out a flash drive. This is what got him killed. Financial records, proof that someone outside the table has been buying influence, buying members. If this gets out, it doesn't just expose corruption, it destroys the entire power structure. John looked at the drive, a tiny piece of plastic worth more than 1,000 lives. "Give it to them," he said. "Walk away." "I can't." "You can." Her jaw set, Dimitri's stubbornness staring back at him. "My father died protecting this. If I surrender it, his death means nothing. If you keep it, your death is certain." She smiled grimly. "Then I'll die like he did. On my feet." John recognized that look, the same one he'd worn a dozen times, the look of someone who'd already accepted the ending. Damn it. "How long until they come?" he asked. "Tonight, maybe sooner. The high table sent their best, a cleaner named Sokolov and his team." John knew the name. Sokolov was efficient, brutal. He didn't miss. "How many?" "6. John's expression didn't change. "Then we have work to do." They prepared in silence. John moved through the factory like a ghost, setting traps, creating kill zones, turning the abandoned space into a labyrinth of death. Katya watched him work with a mixture of awe and fear. "My father said you were the best," she said quietly. "He said when you worked it was like watching a symphony." "Your father exaggerated." "Did he?" She gestured at the preparations. "Looks like poetry to me." John paused. "It's not poetry. It's just what I am." "And what are you?" He met her eyes. "Tired." They came at midnight. 6 shapes materialized from the darkness. Sokolov and his team, professionals. They entered the factory with military precision, spreading out, covering angles. But John was ready. The first man triggered a tripwire. The explosion was small but devastating in the confined space, shrapnel and screams. Sokolov's voice cut through the chaos. "Contact!" Northwest corner. They converged. And John Wick went to work. He moved like smoke and thunder, every shot deliberate, every movement economy. The Glock spoke in whispers and men fell like prayers unanswered. One tried to flank. John caught him with a knife to the kidney, silencing him before he could call out. 2 more came from the east. John dropped the first with a headshot, used his falling body as a shield, killed the second as he paused to process what was happening. Katya fought too, not with John's precision but with raw courage, her father's daughter. When the factory went silent, 4 men lay dead. Sokolov and 1 other remained. They stood in the center of the floor, backs together, scanning the shadows. "Wick!" Sokolov shouted. "The table knows you're here. This won't end. You know that." John stepped into the light, Glock raised, suit torn, blood on his hands, none of it his. Sokolov's eyes widened. "Jonathan, don't do this. You're out. You earned that." "I know." "Then why?" "Because I gave my word." Sokolov's jaw tightened. "To a dead man. To a friend." The gunshot was thunder in the silence. Sokolov fell. His partner tried to raise his weapon. Katya shot him twice. Center mass. It was over. In the end, we're all just stories. The question is, what ending do we write? The factory floor was a graveyard. John stood among the bodies, breathing hard. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, from memory. How easy it was to fall back into this. How natural. How terrifying. Katya approached, still gripping her pistol. "Thank you," she whispered. John shook his head. "Don't thank me yet." He pulled out the burner phone, dialed a number he'd memorized years ago. Winston answered on the first ring. "Jonathan." "It's done." "I know. The table is already moving. They'll want answers. They'll want blood." "Let them come." John dash dash. "I need you to do something, Katya Volkov. She needs sanctuary. The Continental in Berlin, full protection. Silence, then. Under whose marker? Mine. My last one. Jonathan, if you use that, you'll have nothing left. No leverage, no dash. I know. More silence. Winston sighed. Very well. Send her to Berlin. I'll make the call. But John, this puts you back in, completely. Do you understand? I understand. Then God help you. The line went dead. John turned to Katya, pressed the flash drive back into her hand. Berlin, the Continental. Ask for the manager. Tell him Winston sent you. You'll be safe. She stared at him. What about you? I'll clean this up. Then, he looked around at the carnage. Then I'll figure it out. Tears welled in her eyes. My father was right about you. You're a good man. John's laugh was hollow. Your father was wrong about a lot of things. She stepped forward, hugged him. He stood rigid, unused to the gesture, then slowly, carefully, returned it. Thank you, she whispered, for keeping his promise. Go. She pulled away, looked at him one last time, then disappeared into the night. John stood alone. He reloaded the Glock. Habit, always reload. The burner phone rang. A new number. He answered, a woman's voice. Smooth, dangerous. Mr. Wick, the adjudicator. We need to talk. I'm listening. You interfered with high-table business. Killed 6 sanctioned operatives, protected a target under open contract. These are serious violations. I was honoring a blood oath. The table doesn't recognize debts to the dead. Then the table is wrong. A pause. When she spoke again, her voice was colder. You were granted excommunicado status. You were allowed to walk away. That was a gift, Mr. Wick, and you've just thrown it back in our face. So what happens now? Now you have 24 hours. Return to New York. Report to the Continental. Face judgment, or ... quote. She let the word hang. We come for you, and everyone you've ever cared about. The line went dead. John stood in the silence. He thought of his cabin of ash, of the small stone marker where Helen rested. He thought of Dmitri, bleeding out in that warehouse, grinning. You're going to owe me for this. He pulled out the gold coin, looked at it one last time, then pocketed it, and started walking. They say every man has a choice, walk toward the light or embrace the dark. But some men live in the space between, not heroes, not monsters, just survivors. John Wick drove back to New York as dawn broke over the Atlantic. The city rose before him like a judgment, like a sentence. He'd kept his oath, saved Dimitri's daughter, paid his debt. But the cost was everything. Somewhere in the cabin upstate, Ash would be waiting. The fire would be cold. The silence would be complete. And John was going back to war. Because that's what honor demands. And in this world, honor is all we have left. The Baba Yaga wasn't dead. He was never dead, and he was just sleeping. And now he was awake. People keep asking if I'm back. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back.